The station orbiting Ormond was a floating cathedral of diplomacy, humming with tension disguised as civility. Delegates from 12 species floated, slithered, stomped, and flapped through its halls, wearing the tired patience of civilizations that had bickered for centuries. This was a peace summit in name only, an illusion everyone agreed to uphold, so long as the explosions stayed outside. Into this ritual of silent threats and ceremonial greetings walked a woman in a simple gray blazer, hair pinned with the unbothered neatness of someone who never needed to raise her voice. Abigail Maris carried a leather-bound notepad, a tiny satchel with real earth tea bags, and a smile so sincere it unsettled the guards who scanned her. She was introduced as Human Liaison, Category V Translation Specialist. The aliens nodded without care. Humans were new, useful for manual labor and emotional unpredictability. Translators, though? Surely an unnecessary flourish. The galactic dialect mesh was standardized 3 millennia ago. Abigail greeted each delegate with gentle eye contact and small, deliberate bows, as if she'd memorized every species' cultural protocols, not because she had to, but because she decided it mattered. She apologized when she blinked too quickly in front of the Falcon envoy, then thanked them for not taking offense. They hadn't, but suddenly wondered if they should have. She didn't correct them when they assumed she was merely a translator. She smiled and poured tea. Varkal Threx, from the Kentari Dominion, coiled around his throne chair like a rusted whip. His voice rasped through the room. We hope the Human Liaison is aware that nothing of importance will be asked of her species today. Of course not, Abigail said kindly. I'm here only to help you understand each other, though I've been told humans can sometimes be accidental catalysts. The insectoid ambassador, Churake, for luminous eyes blinking in patterns of caution, tilted its head. You speak 12 dialects fluently? 14, Abigail replied, setting down her cup with precise elegance. Including the extinct dialect of the Karth Dominion. I find extinct things fascinating. The council room, tiered and circular, was a place where wars had been halted mid-vote and trade routes redrawn with blood still wet. A low-frequency hum from the Brexel warrior's armor made Abigail's human teeth buzz faintly, but she said nothing. She never interrupted discomfort. Discomfort revealed too much. Abigail's primary seat was not at the table, but beside it, off to the edge, where no one important sits, but where one can see everything. The negotiations began in the usual ceremonial clutter, bickering over fleet presence in Sector 91, broken embargoes, mining rights. Abigail spoke only when needed, translating idioms the mesh couldn't process, metaphors about blood moons, ancestral vengeance, or shared hunt law. She translated quickly and perfectly, never editorializing. She did not roll her eyes when the Kari delegate compared resource sharing to spitting into one sole basket. Still, she took notes, diligently, not just on what they said, but how. Who looked at whom before answering. Who blinked. Who touched their mouthpieces. Who sat forward only when a certain sector was mentioned. During a break, General Krax of the Brexel stomped over. His jaw was cybernetic, half of his face plated in ceremonial alloy. You take good notes, he grunted. Spying. Of course not, Abigail said brightly. That would be rude. Humans don't have the spine for war, he said. Abigail tilted her head. Oh, we do. We just wear it on the inside. Krax snorted and wandered off. That night, while the counselors retired to their chambers to gorge on cloned delicacies and whisper betrayal into hidden channels, Abigail stayed in the common mess. She ordered a broth only humans would find appetizing, brown, lumpy, and unplaceable. She sipped it while quietly watching the security feeds from her pad. She wasn't supposed to have access. She hadn't asked for permission. Someone joined her. Churake, the insectoid with too many eyes and a nervous tilt. I have a question, it said. Your responses are too perfect, too measured. Like you are aware of every angle, every consequence. That sounds exhausting, Abigail said, not quite denying it. You don't show emotion. I'm human, she said, smiling. We're all about emotion. You remind me of our predators, Churake whispered. The silent ones. I get that a lot, she replied. The next day, a diplomatic flare-up ignited. The Kent Hari accused the Corps syndicate of intercepting a military convoy. The Corps claimed they had no presence in that sector. Abigail, called upon to mediate, adjusted a single word in her translation. Request became demand. Just enough. Varkle Threx coiled tighter. They insult us through your tongue. I assure you, Abigail said, I speak only with utmost fidelity. Though some languages lack equivalents for restraint. She apologized. Warmly. Repeatedly. The kind of apology that implies offense was the listener's fault for being sensitive. The mistrust metastasized. The next session was quieter, each party whispering to aides, glancing sideways. Abigail took her same seat, legs crossed, pen dancing idly across paper. She translated a tense exchange about sector control with eerie poise. Would you like some mint tea? She asked when two delegates began yelling. The Falcott delegate slapped the cup away. Abigail picked it up calmly. It's considered bad manners to waste offerings in some Earth cultures. But I'm sure that wasn't your intention. They blinked, unsure if it was an insult. She smiled. That night, she met someone in the maintenance corridor. Not officially a meeting. The kind of intersection that happens when people walk slowly in secure areas and no one asks questions. It was a human technician. He handed her a small package and walked away. Abigail didn't open it. She slipped it into her satchel between notepads and loose sachets of chamomile. The day after, one of the lesser envoys was missing. Rumors buzzed. Station logs were glitchy. Abigail's pad had no unusual data. She was asked briefly if she'd seen him. Not since yesterday's session, she said cheerfully. I do hope he's well. He looked terribly stressed. Do your species molt under pressure? No one pressed further. In the main chamber, Varkle made a joke about human frailty. Abigail did not laugh. She folded her notes and stood. In the Earth language, she said softly, we have a phrase, quiet as the grave. It implies silence can be final. She sat again, took a sip of her tea. Varkle didn't smile for the rest of the meeting. By the end of the week, Abigail had become a curiosity. No one could decide if she was harmless or horrifying. Some thought she was a symbol of Earth's naivety. Others thought she was a warning, a mirror held up to every overconfident species that believed dominance meant volume. At the next convening, Abigail read out the minutes of the previous day. As she reached the final paragraph, she paused. I believe there is a correction, she said. Ambassador Threx, you stated yesterday that the Kent Hari do not engage in planetary destabilization. But I believe the term you used in your language was more elastic, more like flexible enforcement of sovereignty. Did I mishear? Varkle bristled. You twist meanings. I clarify them, she said gently. Words matter. The Karii ambassador, until then disinterested, raised an appendage. Are we to believe Earth has sent someone to provoke war? Abigail looked around the room. I'm just here to translate, she said, voice soft as snowfall. Though sometimes understanding each other is the most dangerous thing you can do. There was no laughter, not even from the Brexel. She collected her things at the end of the session, folded her notes, rinsed her cup in silence. Outside, a junior alien aide watched her from the hallway shadows. He whispered to a hidden recorder, she's not a translator. Abigail passed him on her way out. She nodded, pausing for only a breath. Careful, she said with a small smile. Curiosity is a survival trait until isn't. And she walked on, leaving nothing behind but the scent of mint, a pile of perfectly translated threats, and a room full of beings beginning to fear that the war had already begun, and that Earth had sent its first and only soldier with a notepad and smile. The mood inside the council chamber had shifted from ceremonial stiffness to something jagged and taut. Protocols still held, but barely. A dozen delegates from 12 species performed the rituals of diplomacy with the air of performers aware their stage might collapse at any moment. Conversations ran in careful loops. Eyes lingered too long. The temperature controls read steady, but everyone seemed too warm. Abigail Maris took her usual seat just outside the circle of official power. Her notepad lay open, ink neat and methodical. She had swapped her usual gray blazer for a navy one, nothing ostentatious, but a shade more assertive. Her teacup, today, steamed with Earl Grey. The scent was oddly human and oddly present. She was watching, not just hearing, but registering tone, muscle tension, throat vibrations, antenna twitches. She didn't interrupt or speak unless summoned. But she was seen now, watched back. Across the table, Varkle Threx had begun to hiss quietly in moments of pause. Not words, just soft expulsions of frustration. Churake, usually calm, fidgeted with its translator node, triple-checking Abigail's renderings. The Falcon envoy brought 2 aides instead of 1. The meeting agenda included trade route recalibration. A dull topic. Or so it should have been. Abigail raised her hand before the third proposal. Permission to clarify a phrase in the Kenthari submission, she said, eyes cast downward in deference. Varkle narrowed his gaze, but nodded. She stood, unfolding her posture with careful grace. In your draft, Ambassador, the term used for enforcement mechanism is ambivalent. It could translate as protective presence or occupational force. I've used enforcement personnel unless you have a preference. The Kenthari flinched. We are not occupiers. Of course, Abigail said warmly. Then I shall default to the more peaceful phrase. She resumed her seat. The Core Syndicate's delegate, hearing this, muttered something in their native tongue. Abigail translated aloud. They said, what peace-loving species requires enforcement at every port? A sharp intake of breath circled the room. I apologize, she added, for the honesty of my translation. Later, during recess, Ambassador Churake cornered her by the observation window. You are altering tone. Only for accuracy, Abigail said, sipping her tea. There is subtext in your phrasing. Emotive bias. I'm human, she said. We leak emotion. Churake's antennae twitched. I believe you are causing tension on purpose. I'm translating tension already there, she said gently. Would you prefer I paint lies over it? You walk softly, Churake muttered, but your shadow is large. Abigail smiled. It's the lighting. In her quarters, she reviewed the surveillance logs, non-public feeds. She was not cleared to access them, but she didn't need clearance when passwords came from observation. Watching fingers type. Noting hesitations. Patterns. The galaxy assumed humans were poor at encryption, not masters at interpretation. She played a short clip twice. Cracks of the Brexel speaking with his adjutant in a private hall, unaware of the dormant sensor node 2 panels away. Abigail's fingers danced over the tablet screen, annotating rhythm and tone. The general was planning to reroute ships near disputed space. Brexel training drills, he called them. She tagged the timestamp and returned to her seat. The next day, during a closed session, she asked to clarify another phrase. The Brexel used the word tactical migration. Would the general prefer I translate that as peacekeeping maneuvers or troop movement? Crax's I twitched. You are splitting hairs. I'm brushing dust, she said, smiling. So no one slips. Varkle leaned forward. You enjoy this. I enjoy understanding, Abigail said. It's a rare luxury. That night, another envoy vanished. No alarm was raised. The aid had only been of secondary importance, and the Kenthari suggested perhaps it was a planned reassignment. No one asked Abigail. She didn't offer anything. Instead, she met with someone in the hydroponics garden. A woman in maintenance overalls, human, with streaks of rust on her sleeves. The exchange was brief. We're ahead of schedule, the woman whispered. Any leak? Abigail asked. None. But some of them are getting nervous. They're noticing. Good, Abigail said. Fear is easier to manage than arrogance. She didn't smile until she returned to her quarters. There, she brewed a cup of tea and opened her classified dossier, logged under sympathetic apocalypse. Phase 1, disharmony. 12 species. 5 of them functioned on mutual deterrence. 3 relied on shared trade interests. 2 maintained peace out of fear of the other 10. One was secretly allied with Earth. The web was delicate. She tugged on 3 threads. Tomorrow, she would tug a 4th. In the morning session, a new conflict surfaced. The Corps delegate accused the Brexel of violating territorial flight zones. Brexel denied everything. Abigail calmly translated both accusations and denials, her inflection even, her syntax elegant. But one word, a verb meaning hover patrol, she translated as circling with intent. The Brexel stood, slamming a gauntlet fist against the table. That word implies predation. Apologies, Abigail said smoothly. On Earth, circling can be graceful. Like dance. You are not here to interpret metaphors. Varkle shouted. Abigail turned her gaze to him, her voice velvet. Ambassador, language is metaphor. Even yours. Tension thickened like a pressure drop. Delegates whispered. Suspicion dripped from every glance. Later, in a side chamber, Varkle confronted her directly. Your planet sends a child with a soft voice and sharper teeth than half our warlords. Abigail tilted her head, unfazed. Children listen more than they speak. That's how they learn. Your translations sow chaos. I only translate what is said, she said gently. But it is revealing, isn't it, how fragile your alliances are? Varkle loomed closer. We will see your kind burn in silence. Then I'll translate that too, she said, voice barely audible. Varkle stormed out. He didn't notice the small tracking node she'd left on his coat hem. She did not need to follow him. Only listen. That evening, Churake approached again. It sat beside her on the viewing deck, where human plants from Earth bloomed in blue light terrariums. Basil, thyme, lavender, fragrant and foreign. I have reviewed your translations, Churake said. You omit nothing. Yet. They do not calm. Abigail ran a fingertip along the basil leaves. I'm not here to calm. I'm here to clarify. They say Earth is peaceful. It is. They say you're gentle. She sipped her tea. We are. And yet war follows your presence. Maybe war was already here, she said. And I simply helped you hear its footsteps. You are dangerous. Only to illusions, she said. And illusions should be dangerous to you. Churake paused. I warned them about you. I know. The insectoid didn't move for a long time. What are you really doing here? It finally asked. Translating, Abigail whispered. Just not the way you expected. When she left, she passed cracks in the hall. He watched her with a soldier's eyes, calculating, noting posture, evaluating threat. She nodded. General, she said, you remind me of a hawk from our world. Proud, sharp, but always waiting for the right moment to strike. You think I wait? I think you choose wisely. She walked on, and he realized only minutes later that he had not dismissed her, had not warned her, had not even blinked. In the morning, the council met again. Abigail arrived with her notes already completed. She offered no tea today. The delegates argued before her translations began. The tensions had become self-sustaining. The words needed no push. She listened, watched, catalogued. Spoke only when prompted. Near the session's end, an alert flickered across her internal slate. Phase 1 completed. Proceed to Phase 2. She marked it with her thumbprint and stood. Before today's session ends, she said, voice clear, I offer a small note of clarification for everyone's records. Silence met her. There is a phrase humans use when a meal is prepared perfectly and everything is ready. The table is set. But rarely do guests ask who said it, or who lit the candles, or sharpened the knives. Varkle glared. Cracks leaned forward. Churake's eyes flickered, unreadable. I'm here to translate, she said again. But some of you have assumed translation means passivity, that it means neutrality. It does not. She smiled softly. It means precision. And with that, she closed her notepad, bowed her head politely, and left the room. The delegates remained silent long after she'd gone, each hearing her words not as threat, but as prophecy. The table was indeed set. They just hadn't realized they were the main course. The diplomatic chamber of Ormond had grown quieter, but not calmer. The tension had thickened. settling in the air like dust in still light. Delegates now spoke in clipped phrases, and when Abigail Maris translated, she did so with that same immaculate calm. But her voice now carried a razor's edge no one could ignore. Officially, she was still the translator. Unofficially, she had become something else, a presence no one quite knew how to name. Her words carried weight not because she shouted them, but because they made others shout. She distilled meaning with too much clarity, too much impact. And now, everyone watched their language not for precision, but for fear of what she might reveal within it. Another envoy was gone, disappeared after a routine venting of grievances. The official logs listed it as voluntary transfer. But no one believed that anymore. Delegates began arriving to sessions with more guards. Statements were pre-written. Trust, already brittle, now cracked openly. And still Abigail came. Same measured step. Same gray eyes. Same warmth, polished like a ceremonial blade. Cracks of the Brexel sat straighter than usual, the heavy armor on his chest whirring faintly with tension. Across the table, Varkal Threx's coils barely moved, except for the tip of his tail, which flicked rhythmically, like a countdown. Today's topic was trade violations, but no one truly listened to the commerce reports. They watched each other. They watched her. Abigail stood to clarify a phrase. The core syndicate's use of protective oversight had no direct analog in the Galactic Accord dialects. In Earth English, she offered, we have a phrase for this, babysitting with a weapon. Laughter did not follow. Only silence, heavy and implicating. I can rephrase if that's... No, murmured Churake. Let it stand. And it did. Like a gavel. In the corridors afterward, murmurs turned into murmured threats. Cracks approached Abigail not with bluster, but with calculation. You are manipulating us. I'm clarifying you, she replied, adjusting her notepad. You manipulate yourselves. You are not military, yet your presence is tactical. I never claimed otherwise. You're dismantling peace. Then it was never peace. Just a ceasefire no one wanted to admit had expired. Cracks grunted. We should eject you into space. You've had that option, she said, smiling thinly. You still do. He walked away, fists clenched. He hated that she wasn't afraid. Abigail watched him go, then returned to her quarters. There, she activated a private feed. 12 windows flickered to life, each a different faction's secure comms. She didn't hack them. She'd learned the passwords weeks ago by watching wrists, eye flicks, micro-pauses in conversation. Observation was a scalpel sharper than any codebreaker. She listened for patterns, for rising frequencies, for alliances breaking under pressure. And she charted a map, not of systems, but of psychology. Who would fold under pressure? Who would betray first? Who would survive? She entered report not in Galactic Standard, but in Earth Tactical Code, an obsolete cipher designed to be unreadable even by quantum decryption unless one had studied emotive linguistics and symmetrical warcraft philosophy. She had written her thesis on both. Her message was brief. Phase 2 underway. Emotional destabilization effective. Initiating fracture vectors. Awaiting trigger. The next morning, Churake sat beside her before the meeting began. I once thought your species naive. Abigail poured tea for them both. We encouraged that belief. You hide strength beneath sentiment. No, she said, handing him the cup. We wrap strength in sentiment. It's softer, cuts cleaner. Churake blinked all 4 eyes. I warned them again. And they still won't listen, she said. Varkal began the meeting with a declaration. The Kentari would no longer recognize the Brexel claim to the Serine Drift. Cracks rose immediately, armor plates shifting with threat. You overstep. Your forces fired first, Varkal snapped. Abigail translated both statements with surgical accuracy. Her voice never wavered. In Earth diplomacy, she added, there's a saying, when everyone draws lines, no one leaves room for a door. No one replied, but the tension cracked audibly. Every species present leaned closer, coiled tighter, prepared for the collapse that felt inevitable. The session ended without resolution. Abigail gathered her things and exited. Down the corridor, Churake followed. You are tearing this alliance apart. No, she said softly. I'm showing them how they've already broken it. You're not a translator. I'm not only a translator, she corrected. I'm a mirror. You just don't like what you see. Churake hesitated. Do you want war? I want revelation, she whispered. And Earth wants what comes next. That night, she was summoned to an unlisted chamber. No name, no insignia. Inside were 3 humans in plain clothes. They didn't introduce themselves. Status, the first asked. She handed over her notes. All factions are actively hostile in private, diplomatically strained in public, and psychologically isolated. Prediction window, 3 days. Less if I push. Push. She paused. You're sure? The third human spoke. Do they suspect the trap? No, she said. They think the trap is each other. She was dismissed with a nod. On her way out, the second human whispered, You've done well. I haven't done anything, she said, eyes cold. They've done it to themselves. Back in her quarters, she received a private message. Anonymous, but not encrypted. A string of words. Alliances are built on mistranslation. She stared at it for a long time. Then, during the next session, she decided to speak out of turn. Before we begin, she said, standing with hands folded, I'd like to share a human story. No one interrupted. In ancient times, Earth's tribes would meet to resolve blood feuds. They'd bring food, drink, words. But one tribe would often send someone who wasn't a warrior, nor a leader. Just someone who listened well. That person would find the right phrase, something neutral but open-ended, like a translation with just enough ambiguity. And the other tribe, hearing it, would lean in. She took a breath. And then, before they knew it, they were surrounded. Crack scowled. Are you confessing? I'm translating, she said simply. The story speaks for itself. Varkle rose slowly. This has gone too far. I agree, she said. Much too far. But none of you turned back. You're human filth, he hissed. Abigail's voice stayed serene. You once said humans were weak. I've translated that phrase into 23 dialects. They all have one thing in common. And what's that? In every tongue, she said, it turns into regret. The council exploded into accusation. Varkle shoved a datapad across the table. Evidence of troop movements. Cracks countered with intercepted communiques. The Corps screamed about sabotage. Churake tried to interject, but no one heard. Words flew like blades. Abigail stood amidst it all, unmoving. The chamber doors locked. Not on her command, but she didn't look surprised. Sirens echoed faintly from elsewhere in the station. Lights dimmed. She spoke once more. In Earth literature, we say the climax reveals character. Consider today your climax. She gathered her things and stepped out, as the council chamber erupted into chaos. Down the hallway, a single aide watched her pass, mouth open, uncertain whether to salute or run. She paused. Tell your ambassador, she said kindly. I'll be translating the terms of surrender soon. She disappeared into the corridor, leaving behind the echo of war not yet declared, but already won. The sirens blared low at first, just a hum beneath the flooring of Ormond, a mechanical whisper only the paranoid noticed. But within minutes, the sound swelled into a chorus of metallic alarm, rippling through corridors and slamming across the reinforced council chamber like a closing jaw. Abigail Maris walked calmly down the center aisle, her boots clicking softly on the marble alloy floor. She carried no weapon, wore no armor, only the familiar gray blazer, now spotted at the cuff with something red and dark, blood, though not hers. Behind her, the massive doors hissed shut on a chamber no longer hosting negotiations, but a battlefield. A council reduced to smoke, screams, and fractured diplomacy. She hadn't run. She'd simply walked away, while everyone else tried too late to remember who had invited the human. The security drones in the hallway paused as she approached. Their targeting optics flickered, then went dark. She didn't acknowledge them. They were already programmed to stand down. She hadn't needed to rewrite their code. Only suggest the idea to the technician 3 nights ago, over shared tea and harmless questions. Abigail turned a corner and stepped into the central observation deck, high above the chaos below. From here, one could see the surface of Ormon's hull, a blue steel dome now lit with flickers of weapons fire from the outer defense grid. Some of the factions had turned on each other even before her last words had faded. Others had scrambled to flee, only to discover too late that Earth had locked the emergency protocols. 12 alliances, and not one of them had been built to withstand pressure. She had confirmed it in 90 hours, using only language and politeness. Behind her, footsteps sounded. Human precise. 3 figures entered. The same operatives she'd met with in secret. They no longer wore maintenance gear. Now they wore the uniforms of Earth's Interstellar Strategic Directorate, dark, unmarked, expressionless. "You've triggered the collapse," the first said. "I didn't trigger anything," Abigail replied, eyes fixed on the window. "They detonated themselves. I merely translated what they refused to say aloud. The Kenthari have declared preemptive war on the Brexel. The Brexel retaliated with orbital strikes. 6 species have initiated auto-defensive protocols. The core fleet opened fire on their own allies due to falsified attack codes. I gave them the words," Abigail said. "They gave the meaning." The second operative stepped forward, handing her a sealed capsule. "Final directive. High Command has authorized transfer of control to Operation Apex Mantle. You're to present the terms." She took the capsule, but didn't open it. "Not yet." "Did they all survive the chamber?" she asked. "No. Half confirmed dead. Others wounded. One managed to broadcast a distress signal. To whom? Unclear. We jammed local systems, but there's always a risk. One of the Falca aides escaped into the ventilation." Abigail nodded. "Let him. A little fear will help the message spread." The third operative, younger than the others, watched her carefully. "You seem calm." "I am." "You're covered in blood." "I expected more," she said. "They lacked the discipline I gave them credit for." Outside the observation window, a detonation shimmered in the distance. One of the diplomatic vessels, likely Core or Kenthari, shredded into star-bright debris. Abigail stepped closer to the glass, her reflection staring back at her. Face pale, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. The blood on her cuff had dried. There was more on her collar. She wiped it off with a tissue from her pocket, the motion practiced and unhurried. She turned to the operatives. "Tell Command the alliance is broken. The galaxy will fracture along the lines we expected. Within a week, 27 systems will be ungoverned. Within a month, Earth will step in to mediate, stabilize, and rebuild." The second operative nodded. "And your personal assignment?" She held up the capsule. "This contains the terms. I'll deliver them personally." "You think they'll accept?" "They won't have a choice." The operatives departed without ceremony. They had what they needed. Abigail remained, watching the stars blink beyond the chaos, distant and indifferent. She moved next to the central uplink console and inserted the capsule. The glass dimmed. A holographic display emerged, casting her in soft blue light. The message she transmitted wasn't encrypted. It wasn't secret. It was intended to be intercepted. "To the remaining representatives of the Galactic Accord," she said, "you will have received reports by now of the events on Ormon. You will no doubt assign blame according to your old loyalties, your assumptions, your suspicions." Her voice was calm, almost motherly. "I am here to correct you." A beat of silence followed. "You assumed Earth was the weakest seat at your table, that our absence from your wars, our lack of fleets, our smiles, meant fear, meant softness." She leaned forward. "In truth, we were listening." Her voice dropped. "And in listening, we learned the spaces between your words, the gaps in your alliances, the cracks in your certainty." Behind her, the observation deck shook slightly, a distant explosion rumbling through the station spine. "For too long, you treated words as tools of decoration. For humans, words are weapons." She folded her hands neatly. "I did not come to negotiate. I came to translate. And what I've translated is that your galaxy is ready for new leadership." Her message ended. The screen blinked off. Abigail turned away and made her way toward the hangar. On her walk, she passed the remains of a Brexel patrol unit. 3 soldiers disarmed and unconscious in the hallway, weapons stacked beside them. She had taken care of them herself. Not with firearms, but with pressure points and momentum. Brexel anatomy was mostly muscle, and muscle could be misdirected. In the hangar, a single shuttle awaited. Sleek, human-made. Her next destination was set. A rendezvous with representatives from the neutral colonies, now leaderless, terrified, and looking for someone who could promise protection, understanding, and strength. As the shuttle lifted from the station and curved into the planetary shadowscape, Abigail allowed herself one final look at Ormond, spinning slowly, fires blooming across its surface like a dying ember. She leaned back in her seat, eyes closing briefly. The adrenaline had faded. In its place, certainty. She thought of the phrase that had begun all of this. The words whispered at the first summit, when she sat quietly while they underestimated her. She's just here to translate. And now she had. The shuttle's autopilot pinged. Incoming transmission. She opened it. A single phrase from Earth Command. Well done. Begin Phase 3. Abigail smiled. Her shuttle exited the system without resistance. Ormond was still burning. But in her wake, messages began flying across sectors. Reports, rumors, debriefs. And in nearly all of them, one phrase repeated, passed between terrified officials and desperate outposts alike. The human woman walked out covered in blood, and they applauded her. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't propaganda. It was just a translation.